viewership didn't quite meet the likes of The Mandalorian. I thought that Disney Star Wars Andor was an excellent show, and probably the best one out to date. And while I'll make my case, I'll leave a longer winded explanation to the movie critics online, and I think there are several great videos arguing the case for Star Wars Andor, and I would encourage all of you, if you haven't seen the show, to watch the show and then watch those critics. The reason that I love the show so much is there is just a sense of gritty realism to it. Actions have consequences. It isn't just a series of laser fights that have no significant meaning. The premise of the show is Andor murdering two low-level security guards that are very insignificant characters, however it kicks off a chain of events that end up lasting 12 episodes. There are consequences in this show. Characters dying is not taken lightly, and the characters themselves are excellent. The show isn't bloated with way too many characters to develop, like a lot of modern shows and movies. This show has a smaller cast of characters that get well developed, and you really just start to care about these characters and what their intentions are. We're shown the Empire in a completely new light, and for the first time in years, I'm afraid of this formidable force taking over the galaxy. The first time we see a TIE fighter in their show, it's terrifying. It's presented in a way that seems otherworldly. And overall, the theme of this show is a much more realistic and perhaps darker Star Wars, which I really appreciated. The show is split into several multi-episode arcs, and my favorite arc is the Narkina 5 prison arc. And I think the best episode in the whole show is the last episode in that arc titled One Way Out. And that really inspired me to want to create something in Lego from the show. I started making my biggest module, the working floor of the prison, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I had to make several bricklink orders because I really wanted this to look accurate. I needed to increase my white parts collection and get some unique parts that would really pop. We're going to start from the smallest Mocs and work our way up. I couldn't figure out a way to connect all of these, but then I realized it didn't really matter as long as each module was unique and looked really cool. So starting out with the smallest one, but honestly one of my favorites, this depicts the scene where the prison guards are hiding out after Kino Loy's inspiring speech. I just love the way the minifigures looked in this mock, and when we talk about minifigures later, I'll show you why. But the design was simple enough. I really wanted to make the door a more complicated and complex design because the whole scene is so small. I'm pretty happy with how it worked. It was a hard detail to include. You can see that there is a prisoner peeking in through the window. And I created that just by elevating him on some bricks with a white panel behind him. This next module might be the most iconic for people who haven't seen the show. This scene went around online quite a lot, and I think a lot of people recognize it. I wanted to break up the monotony of all the white and use some gray. While there is still white represented in this module, I like how the different color kind of breaks up the rest of the Mocs a little bit. I had a lot of fun designing this one, especially the water design. Every time I build water, I want to try to do it a little bit different because the possibilities with Lego water are just kind of endless. And I tried planning ahead by putting in several spots where I wanted minifigures to go, hence the gaps in my water. To any of you who noticed the Kino Loy Easter egg at the end of my mock video, I hope you appreciated that. That was one of the saddest scenes of the show to me. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and check out that video here. This next module is one of my favorites, but it also maybe was the hardest one to build. It was hard to make this hexagon-shaped room because I couldn't create the whole room, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. So creating this cutout of the command center, I think worked out pretty well. The wall panels were really fun to make because in the show there's a lot of computer parts going on in the background, a lot of visuals flashing on the screens. And I could have used stickered elements or I could have just used window pieces, but I really wanted to sculpt out what the screens would look like. I like having the orange and the white in there because I wasn't able to include orange on the minifigures like they should have from the show. But getting a little nod to that color palette from the show really felt right to me. I did take some creative liberties when creating the Imperial command post by making the middle one a lot more beefed up. And that's mainly just to draw your attention to it, and also Kino Loy's speech. Next is probably the most tedious section to build, but one of the coolest. The quarters for the prisoners are really iconic and a really unique design. And basically what I did is I created a prototype and then made sure I had enough pieces to replicate it 4 times. And because it's so repetitive, the floor design's pretty basic, and even the cells themselves are pretty basic. I decided to add lights to this to really bring it to the next level. Lights were pretty easy, as long as all the wires are hidden from the front view. I can just tuck them behind. They're contained, but they're not super hidden if you turn this mock around. If you're wondering why I included white and orange lights in several reference photos from the show, you can see that's how the floor looks. And in my mind, this is representing when the floors are about to be turned on and some of the lights have not yet changed to orange. But now turning our attention to the biggest module, ordering the metallic silver droid arms was an accident. I thought I was just getting light bluish gray droid arms, but I'm really glad I got these metallic ones because they really add another level of detail to this mock, which I wasn't expecting. The tables were a really fun design, and I think they do the show justice. And then using these helicopter pieces, or whatever you would want to call them, for the pieces of the Death Star that they're making turned out really well, and I really like the design. It's simple, it's only 3 pieces, and it looks exactly like the show, so I'm really happy with that. I decided to tile off all of these Mocs, which means I had to use sticky tack to hold all the minifigures in place, which, yes, uses a lot of sticky tack, but I think the result is so much better. The platform going down with the officer and then the prisoners climbing up onto it was a really fun detail. I considered crashing it like it would be in the show, but as I'm about to explain, I did take several creative liberties with this module just for the sake of how it looks. Obviously, there are not this many officers out on the floor during the show at this time, but in order to make this a more action-packed mock and a more visually appealing build and action scene, I decided to add more troops. And the side build featuring Andor breaking the water pipe is one of my favorite additions. It just disconnects, it's just connected with some Technic pins, and then you can take it off and you can see the interior here. I just had some wall piping design, even though it doesn't really show. That's more for me. And it's just a smooth little side module, which I think adds a lot to the story. And if you did watch the show, you'll notice that this is actually in the wrong place. This should be right near the front of the build. But my original intention with this build was to bring it to a convention, and having that way in the back would be really hard for people to see, so I opted to move it to the front. And that way I could include the little water design as it's shorting out the floor at the front of the build, which I think is a pivotal moment in the show, so I opted to bring it forward, even though that's a little bit less accurate. So yes, before you type in the comments, I do know how the room is laid out. I just opted to change it just for your guys' sake, so you're welcome. Now for the minifigures, unfortunately I was not able to find a minifigure design for the prisoners that would include the bits of orange, which I think are really iconic to the show, but I really like the simplicity of the white jumpsuits that I picked out, and I basically just took different hairs and heads from different minifigs and mixed them up to create unnamed characters that are still unique and all interesting. I tried not to use the same face twice. And then obviously the Kino Loy and Andor figures are more specialized. Kino Loy uses old Obi-Wan's face, and I used the old Cassian Andor minifigure from Rogue One with a different hairstyle. I just think the new one from the Ambush on Ferrix set is a bit weird and doesn't quite fit this scene, so I opted to not include that one. Although I did include a minifigure with his hair as kind of a tribute to that set. Now the Imperial officers are just the basic Black Imperial Navy troops. They come in a variety of sets, and I ordered a bunch of them online. Obviously, arm printing would have been nice, but way too expensive for this, and I think they look just fine in their black uniforms. Another really fun weapon detail is I have these electric nightsticks that the officers use. I included them in my smallest module, and I think they look really close to how the show portrays them, which is why the scene looks really well brought to life in my opinion. And then for the tools, I just took out all the different unique tools and other parts that I had, which I think shows the chaos of the scene really well. I actually just sprinkled several parts on the floor just to really go for that chaotic look. Overall, I'm really happy with all these modules. I'm curious what you all think in the comments, but I had a blast making this mock series. And I hope to create more from Andor, especially with Season 2 on the horizon. I'm very excited to create something from that show. Obviously, it's gotten harder while I'm off at college to build, but I still enjoy it quite a bit, and my parts collection is still growing in the background, even if you're not seeing it here on the channel. I'd love to do another room tour in the future, but for now, I'd encourage you, if you have not seen Andor show, I would highly encourage you to watch it, because it has really reignited my love for Star Wars, and I hope it would do the same for you. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you guys later.